seems the last few weeks that some people have not been completely happy with my good versus bad videos. Not that I honestly care that much, but I figured why not this week we do something that everyone can enjoy. For those of you unfamiliar, I am a huge fan of the Zelda series. Now, I like music from a lot of the Nintendo properties. I grew up playing a lot of their games, but today specifically, we are going to focus on this track, one of my favorites from the Zelda series, the Lost Woods theme, or also known as Saria's song. For anyone who has played Ocarina of Time, or for that matter, many of the subsequent main console Zelda games, this song was guaranteed to be stuck in your head. There is something so innocent, something so magical and wondrous about this literally just 30-second composition. Normally you would think that 30 seconds on repeat would be exorbitantly annoying, but for some reason, while you're running around exploring this world, while this track is playing, it extremely enhances the experience. So if we're going to dissect video game music, we need to know what exactly is happening while this music is playing. The Lost Woods theme plays in the Lost Woods in Ocarina of Time. It is a wooded maze-like area that is situated right next to the first town that you come out in. It's supposed to be your hometown. Long story. This woods is said to be mystical. It is said to get people lost. It is very hard to find your way around, although, like any other video game, if you know it, you know it. Children who get lost in the Lost Woods turn into creatures known as Skull Kids. Adults who get lost in the Lost Woods turn into evil monsters known as Stolfos. For some reason, Nintendo thought it was necessary to rename Skeleton Dude with Sword Stolfos. The Lost Woods is also home to many mysteries, a lot of sprite, fairy-looking things that float around. Not to mention, it is the hub through which you enter the Sacred Grotto, which is supposed to be a place of great importance, and yet another maze here in our land of Hyrule. So taking a look at our song, our melody starts out very simply F-A-B. Now if we look at the background accompaniment, which really there's not that much, it's a very stripped down composition, which actually I find very beautiful that you can detail such intricate theory into something so stripped down. We'll get into that. The accompaniment, if I recall, is an oboe timbre. This is a bounce from the bass note of F to upper register notes of B and C. B and C are a half step away from each other, which means there's going to be a lot of dissonance between the two of them. If we look at the first melodic phrase here, F-A-B, F-A-B, F-A-B-E-D, between the background accompaniment and the melody, we can outline what this chord actually is. Now, I did not include the E in this chord, specifically because I believe it to be a passing tone more than actually a part of the main melody. So if you look at the notes in our accompaniment and the primary notes in our melody, we get F, A, C, B, D, which gives us an F, add sharp 11, add 13 chord. That's a mouthful. When you have a chord that has anything over 7, if you subtract 7 for it, that'll tell you what degree in the scale it is in relationship to that chord. So a sharp 11 is really just a sharp 4, but it's at least an octave above from where the bass note is. Same with the 13. The 13 is just an add 6, but again, an octave above for where the bass note is. So a sharp 4 or a sharp 11 is what we call a tritone. This is one of the most dissonant intervals in music. If it was a sharp 4, because it would be closer to the bass note, that means there would be more dissonance than usual. But if we change the voicing, which is what adding that extra octave in between everything does, it spreads the voicing out. It gives us less dissonance and actually gives us some very interesting colors. So instead of it sounding really kind of cluttered and muddy, it sounds very pleasant. Here's an example. Since we're in the key of C major, this would be our 4 chord. This gives us a little bit of a sense of comfort, but since we have colored it so much, we kind of take the comfort and give it some more personality. The melody itself, F-A-B, F-A-B, sounds really awkward and kind of weird. That is because B is actually a sharp 4 from F. Again, I was talking to you about the dissonance. gives you a sense of unease, and it's not necessarily bad because paired with the rest of the notes that are happening right now, it's almost like a sense of playful wonderment, especially if you consider the rhythm, which we will get into a little bit. The next phrase in our melody is B, C, B, G, E, D, E, G, E. The first B, C, while technically part of this melodic phrase, are actually an incomplete measure leading us into our next chord. They act more as accents than they do actually being a core part of the melody. Our next chord, considering our background accompaniment focuses on C, and then we outline B, G, E, descending arpeggio in our melody. This makes it very easy. It is a C major 7. Take note, those of you who are intermediate to new to music theory, when we did that descending arpeggio of B, G, E, that is in fact an E minor triad. All you need to do is put a C below it, and that turns it into a C major 7. It's almost like you have a C major and an E minor blended together to make this new beautiful hybrid chord. It's very interesting stuff, specifically if you look at the interval relationships, but we can do that another time. Then we repeat line 1 again as our beginning statement, but then our following phrase that kind of is our response is slightly different. We start again with B, C, but then we go up to E, then down to B, then down to G, and then B, G, D, E. This is really just a different outlining of the last second phrase, a different way of expressing the E minor arpeggio. By going from this F sharp 11 add 13, which is very wondrous, very curious, almost unsettling, to our tonic, the C, it's almost like we get ourselves a slight resolution. Especially since the two notes that are in addition to the normal F major arpeggio, the D and the B, are actually part of the dominant, which would be G major. This further increases our tension wanting to resolve. It's again, very interesting stuff. So if we look at the rhythm of this part of the song, the only percussion we have is a tambourine. The bells on the tambourine shake with a slap on the drum head of the tambourine happening on beat 4 of every measure. The gives us a little bit of a flow, a little bit of a skip, almost a gallop, but not quite a gallop. We'll get there. It gives you the feeling of being a little bit light off the ground. In addition to that, the rhythm of our backing accompaniment is boom bop 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 boom bop bop boom bop 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 boom bop bop. It naturally has a bounce because our first note, our bass note, boom, bounces up, boom bop bop bop, to our higher register notes in our background music. Again, furthering this bouncy feeling, where it doesn't feel much like you're light on your feet so much as you are bouncing. When you combine the feeling of being light on your feet with bouncing, it almost makes you feel like skipping. The rhythm is implying skipping through the woods. If you look at the disjunct nature of the melody, that just means that they are not next to each other in the scale. This gives a feeling of loftiness to an extent. Given the fact that we're already at 140 beats per minute, that is vivace in the classical Italian tempo marking, that already gives us the feeling of moving quickly. The upward motion of the first contour with the dun 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 rhythm behind it gives us a sense of wonderment. Then followed by dun 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 da 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 da. Almost gives us a sense of comfort, of joy, of innocence. With approximately 13 seconds of music, we have communicated a very specific feeling. Now, moving on to our next part. Our next melody is D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, E. A very simple walk up the C major scale. The chord behind D, E, F is the 2 chord, which if you actually look at the notes in the 2 chord, D and F are the 1 and 3 of that triad. If you look at the next notes in our melody, G, A, B, G and B are both the 1 and 3 of the 5 chord, which goes behind those notes in the melody. Now, while B and E are descending from E as opposed to rising, E is still the 3rd of the 1 chord, which sits behind C, E, and then the B in the middle, which is really just an accent note, but it's also a 5th away from E, which makes it pleasing to go from B to E. Long story, let's keep going. While we hold that last E, we go from 1 to 6, which is our relative minor, which also happens to make that E the 5 of our 6. Man, I know this sounds complicated, but it's actually really simple if you look at it on paper. Is part of what makes this part sound so natural and free-flowing. We're done adding the weird notes to accent things. The only notes that are going to lie outside of the chord are passing tones. Our next phrase is exactly the same as our last phrase, only our last 3-note grouping ascends C, D, E, which is still the 3rd of the 1 chord and the 5th of the 6 chord. This melody is extremely conjunctive. That means that each of these notes belongs right next to the other notes in the scale. When it has a 3-note idea in the da 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 da. In the major key, ascending, this gives us a feeling of our spirits being lifted. If we look at the rhythm of our accompaniment, we still have the bounciness, the bass bounce to the upper register bounce that we did in the previous section, but we have almost double timed it. Not only that, we have taken our tambourine rhythm from going to a straight gallop. This gives us a feeling that we are increasing the speed, increasing the energy, in a sense increasing the tension too, if you look at the combined increased rhythmic feel with the rise of the melodic contour. Next, we have a melodic phrase, which is pretty much a classical exercise, and I'm gonna have to read this off the paper because I'm not gonna remember all this. D, C, F, E, G, F, A, G, B, A, C, B, D, C. Ending with E, F, D, E. If you notice anything about these 2-note groupings, it starts with a higher note and then the note right below it. After you go to the note below it, you ascend 2 scale degrees, descend 1, ascend 2 scale degrees, descend 1, repeat the pattern. This gives us a similar effect of our rising melodic contour that we had on the previous 2 phrases, only it makes it more dramatic because we rise, fall quickly, and then rise dramatically afterwards, fall quickly, with a bounce feeling yet again. The chord behind the first half of this phrase is a minor 2, and then the accompaniment is playing a C major 7 behind the second half of this phrase. However, our chord is not a C major 7. The background accompaniment is playing C, G, and B. But if we look at what is implied by our melody, we are outlining an A minor arpeggio. This is why I tell you melodies are included in your harmonic analysis. You have to look at what the melody is doing in order to get a complete picture of what actual chord is being played here. So in reality, the chord that we have here is first inversion of 6, 7, add 9. I'm not going to get into inversion chords right now, but basically, while the chord is A, that is not what is in the bass. And also, since A is our relative minor, our next chords move to the 3, but it is a major 3 instead of what would normally be a minor 3. If we took our 6 chord and looked at it from that perspective of minor, making 6 our 1, the 3 would be our 5, or our dominant. So if we look at 3 as 5, our dominant, but instead of resolving to our minor 1, we go back to what would be Our 6th chord from this perspective, that is what we call Deceptive Cadence. All of the tension that we have built from those previous 2 melodic phrases has come to a head at this moment. Between the fact that it kind of wants to resolve to the relative minor, but we're not allowing it for multiple reasons, and then going from what kind of seems like the relative minor to its dominant, that adds a lot of tension right there, in addition to the melodic contour that I described to you before. For a song with very few instruments in it, it's actually quite sophisticated and very beautiful in its simplicity. It has enough repetition in its melody to give you a little bit of ear candy. Not only that, you're not used to hearing it 1,000 times, so it almost catches your ear and forces you to listen, and then starts tugging at your heartstrings before the end. All of this happens in 30 seconds of music. To answer your question, no, I had no idea this is what was involved with this song before diving into this. I just did it because I liked the song and I figured it would be easy. Boy, was I wrong. But this explains why everybody loves this song, because even though there's not a whole lot of notes going on, there is a lot going on. Especially when you combine it with the experience of having played this game, especially when you're a child, but also the fact that it's paired with this specific environment, and any of the variations of it are usually done with some grandeur. Not to mention, in the midst of making this, I realized that our first 2 chords in our chord progression are actually the opening chords to the entire game, which is just like, holy crap, what does that imply? Koji Kanto, Nintendo's premier composer, is absolutely a master of what he does. Just absolutely wonderful. So what were you most confused by? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, if you like what I do on this channel, please support me on Subscribestar. That is the only way I can keep making badass content for you. Be sure to like this video, be sure to share this video, please. And you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Become the Knight. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video. Rock on!